So what I'm suggesting is that by not just watching Netflix, but to realize that watching Netflix or watching movies or watching Disney movies with your grandchildren or children or whatever can actually be really good for you if you learn how to utilize and tap into that energy that those characters have. Welcome to the Stories Cafe podcast, the espresso version of Stories Cafe, offering quick, enriching moments of reflection on literature, cinema, archetypes, philosophy, and the art of living deliberately. Just like a perfectly crafted espresso at a Parisian cafe, each episode is a brief pause for you to submerge yourself in something invigorating and fulfilling. I'm Annette Wernblad, course creator, internationally published author, and wanderer at heart. So cozy up as we explore the powerful world of stories, how they shape our lives, and teach us the art of living deliberately. We are talking about archetypes today, and we're talking very specifically. This is not just going to be a general introduction to archetypes. This is going to be very specific, related to this season and the situation we're in. So I don't serve coffee or croissant, but the whole idea is that this is a place to relax but also to sort of refuel, get new inspiration, and hopefully knowledge about film or books and cities and real cafes. So we're just sort of pretending that we're together, since we can't meet in a real cafe because we're in many different countries. So just pretend that you're sitting in a nice cafe, pretend that we're all together and going through this topic of archetypes. My theory is that the stories you hear since you were little, the movies you watch, the books you read, especially the books when you were a child, but also the books you read now, the movies you watch, the television series you watch, watching it and reading those things is good for you. That's my theory to begin with. But what we're focusing on today is the characters in those movies we watch, those TV series we watch, those books we read, and especially the characters that we really identify with, either positively or negatively. We're dealing today with Jungian psychology. The theory is that the characters that you identify with in books or movies or TV that you really, really like or admire or look up to represent what Jung sometimes called the gold in the shadow, some of the best things about yourself that you may not have integrated into yourself, whereas the characters that you really, really dislike or hate or detest or whatever strong negative emotion you have can be seen as sides of your own shadow, the unintegrated shadow part of yourself. So what we're dealing with today very specifically is those characters, and the whole idea is that how can you tap into that tremendous energy and force that these characters have and have them help you? And I'm going to talk a little bit about the hero's journey because that's, I think, relevant too. But we're focusing mainly on the archetypes, that is, the characters. There are many different ways of defining what an archetype is. One of the most basic is it is a collectively inherited unconscious idea, pattern of thought, or image that is universally present in individual psyches. What does that mean when you read it like this? It's like, what? The archetypes, according to Jung, belong in what's called the collective unconscious, and when we say that it's collectively inherited, it means that when we're born, we already have access to the archetypes. Jung discovered that across different cultures, across different time periods, the same archetypes, the same characters are present universally in the cultural documents of different cultures. And that means that if you start looking at the cultural works, the books, the cave paintings, or even if you look at people's dreams, it's the same kind of archetypes that go across different cultures at different times in history. And that led Jung to talk about the collective unconscious. Another way of putting it, it's a recurring universal symbol or motif in literature, painting, or mythology, and that means all our stories. They're characters sharing similar traits throughout cases in classic storytelling. The characters we dream about at night, the characters that are present in our cultural works, in the books we read, the movies we watch, the television series, though a lot of those works can be seen what I call mythologically, even apparently realistic works, that if we start looking at them like myths, and if we start looking at the characters like archetypes, it goes much, much deeper into us. And that means that the realistic tale, its purpose, that is the very purpose of realism, is to show us outer reality as faithfully to outer reality as possible. As soon as we start operating with myths, fairy tales, archetypes, we go into something that has a much deeper purpose than just showing the surface, just showing what things look like around us, which goes into showing what things look like inside us, rather. And so those characters you really like and those characters that you really don't like are mirrors, reflections of sides of yourself that you probably haven't integrated and that you have a chance to integrate. So what I'm going to be showing you is that you can use archetypes to get through this period and not just survive it, but actually thrive. The hero's journey is the basic structure we have in the good mythological stories. Is that we see the hero who's not yet a hero in his or her normal surroundings. Then comes the call to adventure, and then that character has to venture into unknown territory, which leads step by step into what is called the inmost cave, or the belly of the whale, or the dark night of the soul, as St. John of the Cross called it. And in that inmost cave, that character has to face what he or she fears the most, something that has not been integrated into his or her character and life. And that means that if you survive that test, in fairy tales and myths we often have trials and tests. If you survive that, and if you look at what it is you're supposed to look at, now you're allowed to call yourself a hero, and you're allowed to reach out for the Holy Grail or whatever else the prize is for going through that journey. That the purpose of the hero's journey is always the same thing. Whether we have a Scorsese film or a classic myth about Oedipus or fairy tale about Little Red Riding Hood or The Lord of the Rings or something else, the purpose is always the same, is that the hero gets through all the trials and tribulations that he or she has to go through, and that inmost cave has a opportunity to come out of the cave a bigger and stronger and more whole person than he or she was going in. So what I'm suggesting is that by not just watching Netflix, but to realize that watching Netflix or watching movies or watching Disney movies with your grandchildren or children or whatever can actually be really good for you if you learn how to utilize and tap into that energy that those characters have. And what that means is that when we are ready to leave the inmost cave that we've been in for far too long. I think that's a good way of looking at it, is we are in some kind of inmost cave. And the point of all this is that by learning to integrate and tap into those favorite characters, you can come out of this inmost cave like the hero in the classical hero's journey, a better and stronger and more whole person than you were going in, rather than coming out beaten. Getting that perspective of looking at this differently. Because if you start looking at it with mythological eyes, if you start looking at it with the archetypes and learning to feel what archetypal sides of myself are being most affected by this whole situation, and which other archetypal sides of myself could help me become stronger, then you will be in a completely different place now, and you'll be in a completely different place when we're ready to gradually start leaving that inmost cave. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed your espresso break and learned something new. If you're eager to dive deeper into the world of stories and ideas, be sure to hit the follow button in Spotify or the plus button in Apple Podcasts so that you get each new episode straight to your podcast app. You can also visit us at Stories Cafe. Just go to stories-cafe.com. There you can explore free content for a taste of what we offer, or if you're ready for more, a paid membership unlocks in-depth discussions, full access to our archives, and a vibrant community of fellow story enthusiasts. I am so thrilled to have you here, and I look forward to welcoming you back to the Stories Cafe soon.